Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Daryl Messinger. I'm a past president of Beth and the immediate past chair of the Union for Reform Judaism. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're just letting folks in. We have everyone on mute, but if you, and I guess Charlie has me on spotlight, which makes it harder to see everyone. Charlie, why don't we just cancel the spotlight for right now so some people can go to gallery and just take a moment and take a look at our wonderful community near and far. One of the great blessings, if there are, and there are many, but they're sometimes hard to discover, of this virus, is that we are able to connect near and far. And so just take a moment right now. We're 80 participants. Take a moment to scroll through the screens and look at each other's faces, wave, and we'll get started in just a minute as we just let folks in so that everyone has a chance. So I see some wonderful board members from the URJ, from the World Union, as well as many, many Beth faces. So it's so wonderful that you took the time today to join this very special meeting. So it looks like all of the folks are in. We'll continue to let folks in, but I don't want to delay us. Good afternoon and welcome to this special meeting to hear from Ambassador Rabbi David Saperstein, current president of the World Union for Progressive Judaism, as well as from Marie Bernard. I want to just thank everyone on this call, on this Zoom today. We have raised over $7,000 in 2 short weeks. That is phenomenal, and it's because of your generosity, and I can't thank you each enough. I am hoping that by the end of next week, we will have raised more than $10,000. So we are going to leave the registration open so people can add, can encourage others to add to their gifts. So thank you so much, very much appreciated. In the chat, I would love for folks for right now to put in the chat where your ancestors are from. We often talk that we are all immigrants, and I think that is certainly true. But we often don't realize how many common locations we come from. So put in the chat, if you have access to it, where it is you're from. And Charlie, I'm hoping everyone can see this, who can, but I'll read off a couple of them. Poland, Hungary, Ukraine, Belarus, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Germany, Italy, England, Poland, Turkey, Galicia, Czechoslovakia, where's that? Moldova, Belarus, Ukraine, Zuravici, Russia, Polish board in early 1900, Spain, Portugal, Ireland. So we see all of where we're from, and we are one community. Certainly that's been the case these last few weeks. We've learned that we are a global community. And with that, I'd like to turn to Rabbi Janet Martyr to introduce Rabbi Saperstein, our featured speaker.
Hi, everyone. Wonderful to see you today. And it's a special honor for me to introduce Rabbi David Saperstein, president of the World Union for Progressive Judaism, and one of the most highly respected rabbis in America and the world. He is a religious leader of international stature, an impassioned social critic, an astute political analyst, and an eloquent, uplifting voice in difficult times. Designated by Newsweek magazine as the most influential rabbi in America, and by the Washington Post as the quintessential religious lobbyist on Capitol Hill, For decades, he directed the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, representing our movement to the US Congress and the administration. From 2015 to 2017, he served as the US Ambassador at Large for Religious Freedom, our country's chief diplomat for religious freedom issues. In this role, Rabbi Saperstein dealt directly with the ministries of religion, justice, and foreign affairs in the 32 nations that he visited, and he developed ties with religious leaders and institutions all over the globe, including many of our World Union congregations. But wait, there's more. He's also an attorney, and he taught seminars on church state law and Jewish law for 35 years at Georgetown University Law Center. A prolific writer and speaker, Rabbi Saperstein has appeared on most US television and talk shows and in international media in more than 15 countries. His articles have appeared in the Washington Post, in the New York Times, and Harvard Law Review. He is the co-author with Albert Vorspan of blessed memory of a book called Jewish Dimensions of Social Justice, Tough Moral Choices of Our Time. Rabbi Saperstein was once, long ago, my boss, then my colleague in service to the Reform movement. He remains a mentor and a much admired friend. It is a great pleasure to bring him to Beth through the magic of Zoom for this special program.
Well, Rabbi Marta, thank you. I've been blessed in my career to work with 3 generations of the great rabbis of American Jewry, and there are none who I admire more, respect more than your rabbi, Rabbi Marta. So it's always wonderful to be doing something with her, always risky if she's introducing you, whether she's roasting you or doing a serious introduction. Thank God I was spared the other, because there's nobody better than she in that regard. And I'm delighted to see Michaela with us, who is also at the Religious Action Center. So that's really a pleasure. And so many friends, and Sherry and Charlie, thank you for all your good work. But this congregation is for the World Union, really a shining exemplar of a partnership, of support and cooperation that is surpassed by no other congregation. If we had 100 like you across the globe, what we would be able to do. I'm honored to be, of course, with Darrell Messinger, who has been such a great leader of the Reform Jewish movement and a friend. This is a remarkable moment in human history. I guess pretty much every time a crisis happens, we say the same thing. The only difference is we're right this time. This is really something different. It should be self-evident to every political leader, every religious leader, every person, that this is truly a global crisis. We cannot solve this problem and leave anyone out. We cannot protect ourselves if we're not protecting all of humanity. It is impossible to ignore what is happening all across the world, in some of the poorest countries of the world, if we're going to leave them by the wayside and know that what they're going to do is going to come back to haunt us simply by the nature of what a pandemic is. There are lots of lessons to be drawn from this: global warming, global economic justice. But there's an obvious one as well. We too are an international community, the Reform Jewish community. With the help of people like you in this congregation that's done so much for the World Union, we've now spread to 50 countries across the globe. Because of the support of congregations like yours, we have helped invest in the reform movement in Israel that it's doubled in size in just the last decade in terms of the number of congregations, growing numbers of people feeling more comfortable in meshing their respect for an age-old tradition with their modern sensibilities and finding a place and a home in the Reform Jewish movement, as is happening all across the globe. but that's particularly true in Israel, where we have grown significantly in this last decade. Now, the non-Orthodox movements total, according to the latest polls, about 13% of the community. That's the same number as the Haredi community, the ultra-Orthodox community in Israel. They have the higher birth rate. We have the higher attraction to Israelis who are looking for spiritual meaning in the 21st century and staying at the cutting edge of the 21st century, not feeling that they have to choose between the two. It's an exciting time to be involved in the work that the World Union does in the former Soviet Union, because so many people of this generation and the generation prior grew up in secular surroundings. They too have found spiritual meaning in a modern sensibility in a way that has attracted them. When I visited there, not because I was there, just coincidentally, it was a young adult Shabbat in Moscow. There were 100 young adults in their 20s and 30s who knew the entire service, who were able to participate in leading it. And these are the products of our camps. These are the products of our programs. And you can replay this across the country. When I first came in and began this job for a year, it was just shortly before the high holidays. And we were able to place rabbis for the high holidays in emerging communities, from Beijing to Brazil, from Belarus to Bali, from Bangkok to Barcelona. And that's only the bees. It's really extraordinary, as I was traveling the globe as a US ambassador, to see these emerging communities in places you would never expect them to take hold, but they are. And now we've opened up seminary programs, rabbinic training programs, professional training programs in Moscow, in South America, that are training Portuguese and Spanish speaking rabbis, increasing the chances they'll stay at home. This is all something extraordinary. And what is clearly obvious is we too will only be as strong as we are anywhere in the world. The global community of liberal Judaism has the potential to capture so much of the imagination of Jews all across the globe. And we do so merging that distinct spirituality that our modern ceremonies and rituals and music has brought into Jewish life, our respect for the tradition and lessons it brings across the millennia to us today, and that commitment that we are God's partners in creating a better world. I'm so proud of the social justice programs that our synagogues, like yours, do in America. Your support for the Sunnyvale program, the vital work it does, is just one small manifestation of that. But equally so, to see people in Russia doing social justice programs. In COVID, after COVID-19, the emergency committee set up in Rome, the work when I was in Australia in March, right before they shut the airports. I got out on the last plane after spending a couple of weeks meeting with our community there. They too we're doing great work and are doing great work now. In Israel, our efforts to reach the shut-ins of the older community from the Russian Jewry with our new Russian-speaking congregations that have developed in Israel, the food programs that we're involved with, the feeding programs that you do with Sunnyvale are being done by people all across the globe. I'm extraordinarily proud of that. It's who we're about. God calls us to be a holy people, and what does God tell us is the first thing we do? To set aside the corner of the fields if we want to be like God, to feed the hungry. What does Isaiah tell us God really wants from us? To deal our bread to the hungry, to break the chains of the oppressed, to shelter the homeless, to create in Leviticus 19, as parashah of this time of year, courts of justice in every community in which we live. It's not a Jewish obligation. The rabbis explain that that is a universal obligation of what it means to be a Noahite country, a righteous and moral country for any country. And we are a light to the nations. We are a moral goad to the conscience of every country that we live in. That kind of vision is not needed more than it is today. That sense that we're all in it together, that Judaism recognized after the destruction of Noah, or the flood, when Noah became the progenitor of all humankind. We can all be destroyed, or we can all live together. That's true for us as a Reform Jewish community. It is true for us as the American people, who have a special place in this moment in human history to play in the world. It is true of us as a human being. Recognize the common humanity of all human beings created in the image of the divine. That's what we taught the world, how vitally it is needed today. And you can help in so many ways. You're doing it with the contributions you've made to feed the hungry, as God commands us to do in your community, in your area. You do it when you support the World Union, as you have done in participating in this program. Growing our congregations. I don't have to tell any person on this call how hard this COVID-19 crisis has hit us. The Reform Jewish movement, like almost every other Jewish organization, the Jewish community, like almost every other religious community, the religious community, like every other nonprofit that does good in the world. We're all seeing our budgets ravaged with uncertainty by our generous donors, how much they can do at any given time. So you start where you can, as you're doing here today, knowing that once we have a better read on what the markets will do, where the economy will be 6 months from now, our ability to invest in the charities, the good causes we support will become clearer as the year goes on. But we do the best we can do, because the survival of these entities depends on it. And that's true for the World Union as well. Our biggest donors have stood up and come through for us, but having the entire community of those who support these efforts respond to allow us to keep the extraordinary training programs we do for religious and professional leaders all across the globe, to continue to train people to do this social justice work I described, to keep our Jewish education programs, above all our camp programs, the URJ, the Union for Reform Judaism. Its needs are so great because the camp programs are going to be shut this summer with enormous costs and challenges to us. And I know that everyone's asking for your support. The fact that you showed up today means the world to me. Means the world, I know, to Sherry and Charlie, to Rabbi Martyr, and every person who has worked in putting this extraordinary day together. So I thank you all. I thank you for stepping up. I thank you for being part of a community at Beth that has always cared. I thank you for your leadership that's a model for others. I thank you for your support for the extraordinary work of Sunnyvale. And I thank you for being a partner in the World Union, for together, truly, we can go from strength to strength, even at this difficult time, and sustain this work, investing in the future for generations yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'm going to ask that folks, if you have a question, to please put it in the chat now to me or to Charlie. We will get there. David, you have traveled the globe many times over, and you see wonderful examples of community, of congregations. What examples give you particular hope right now for our brand of Judaism, for our progressive Jewish values, and for our communities around the globe? Maybe some specific examples will help illustrate with the kinds of communities you see everywhere.
Sure. I mean, let me start with the two communities that you all know best, the American Jewish community in Israel. Here, it's amazing. When I grew up, Daryl, here, the conservative movement was the largest stream of the Jewish community. And today, the Reform movement, according to Pew, and reaffirmed by the 2019 American Jewish Committee poll, the Reform movement is larger than the Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist communities combined. The work that the Religious Action Center does makes me so proud. And the work that IRAC does, fighting for Reform Jewish rights, winning victories in a hostile environment here, not hostile by the dreams of a democracy, but hostile by the realities of the political configurations of the governments and the challenges that we face there. And against that all, the determination of our people to continue to grow that movement, to build really good schools and camps and summer programs and pre-IDF programs that do extraordinary social justice work as they're training to go into the army. These are amazing. But when I visited the seminaries, the new people and met with the people from the new seminaries in Buenos Aires, and in Moscow, that's training FSU rabbis now. And when they train in their own countries, they're far more likely to stay. When they used to train only at HUC or Geiger College or in Germany or Leo Beck College in London or a Jerusalem school, they would often ended up making aliyah to any of those countries here because they loved the communities and became involved with them or fell in love with someone there and decided to stay here. But now these people are eager to stay in their own countries, eager to build and you listen to these young people who grew up in our camps, who grew up in our Netzer program, and Nifty you all know, and it's wonderful, but boy, Netzer is just fantastic across the global scene. There's such loyalty and involvement here, and the World Union's young adult program, Tamar, transcends anything that you see by any, maybe more childs here, a bit rivals it here. But in general, there's so little that attracts the people in their 20s and 30s the way our Tamar program does on a global level. Those are the things that just, you spend time with them, you cannot help but be inspired. You cannot help but feel we're on the ascendancy, despite all of the struggles in countries that the Orthodox dominate, where they try and shut us out. But someone mentioned Belarus before. I think Sherry mentioned Belarus here. In Belarus, we have like 4 congregations. They have been so active and so successful, and the rabbi is so good there. They've become the interlocutor with the government, not Chabad. How many places can you say that? It's kind of like North America and Belarus. Here, the Reform movement dominates here. And who would have dreamed of something like that? And who would have dreamed of some of the places that we are having Reform congregations in Israel, in areas that are not Ashkenazic areas at all? You never would have thought a Reform community could take hold. Those are the kinds of things that inspire me, Daryl.
Great, David. I have a couple of different questions here, but let me always go to the rabbi first. Rabbi, please.
Thank you, Daryl. So this is a little bit more of a general question. There's certainly been a historical pattern when there is increasing economic stress of the rise of authoritarian governments and also the rise of anti-Semitism. And we've just in the recent months seen certainly some disturbing evidence of that connected with the virus. Is this an inevitable trajectory, or do you think, in fact, we could be moving to more open and tolerant forms of society, having passed through this crisis once that we do?
Okay, the truth is, we don't know. In the time, from the time that I left government, at the end of the Obama administration, and even during the Obama administration, you began to see this enormous uptick of authoritarian governments where before there had been proto-democratic or democratic governments. We saw it in Poland, we saw it in Hungary, we're seeing it in many countries across the globe, the resurgence of authoritarian forces in Central and South America now, after several decades of movement towards democracy in those areas. Part of that has been fed by economic problems in those countries. Part of that has been fed by the destabilizing impact of large numbers of migrant communities that have come into, which always seem to evoke a kind of authoritarian and xenophobic response at a populist level, and resulting in leaders who represent that that mentality in their leaders. And what we've seen now in countries from China to El Salvador, and I can think of a dozen more across the country, where the coronavirus and the need to impose discipline on people, either by being effective in persuading them or by using the coercive power of government to demand responsible actions, that's been taken by a number of the authoritarian governments to extremes, shutting down newspapers who are being critical, isolating political leaders who have challenged them, all in the name of controlling the virus and not disturbing the public, and not confusing the public so that they listen only to the government. When the government shuts down other voices, though, it abandons, the sacred lesson of our texts, in which, in the most stringent differences of opinion, we believe they will avail, or these and these were the words of the living God. Here it's kind of a proto-democratic notion of freedom of speech, that the belief that out of the free, in a marketplace of the free ideas being expressed, that truth could rise to the surface. Here, so these are difficult times, and it may be that we're seeing the end of a period in history in which, after World War II, we saw this enormous growth from 1945 until about 2007. From 2007 until today, it's been moving in the other direction. Here, what I do know is, whoever going to staunch the movement in the other direction, it requires determined and inspired American leadership. And whatever you think about President Trump, here, whether you support his policies or you don't, I will tell you from an international perspective, as he's withdrawn America from leadership of the great multilateral institutions America helped shape after World War II, and withdrawn us from a presence in the world scene, he's left a vacuum that everywhere I travel to, China and Russia are filling. Russia is the only force talking to both the Shia and the Sunni Muslims in the Middle East. China is everywhere in Africa and South America today, doing the kinds of things, building infrastructure, investing in educational programs, the kind of thing that America did so well after World War II. So, and Israel was often a partner as that kind of inspired leader, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. Here, we need that more than ever before, and I really hope and pray that our leaders, whether it remains the current leaders or the new leaders, that our leaders will recognize that the future of the question you asked about, is this a new chapter in history that is taking us in a more authoritarian direction and xenophobic direction than we've known before, or is this an ebb and flow in which there's been a real ebb drawing us out in another direction, which is often followed by a flow back in the other direction? Which is the image? It's up for us to decide.
David, I'm going to package some of these questions together. And the first set, we've had a couple of questions about what you see as the enduring changes post sheltering in place, particularly with the use of streaming and Zoom and maybe other technical resources that you're seeing congregations either needing or taking advantage of. Can you talk to what you see? We know that many, many congregations in the US have jumped on Zoom. I know the URJ's licensing of Zoom has gone up by tenfold, 100, we went from, more than that, we went from, maybe a couple thousand licenses to over 60,000 in the last 4 weeks.
It's been absolutely remarkable.
And so I'm curious what you're seeing in terms of, use of technology to create community.
If first of all, just as the head of the World Union, what an extraordinary feeling and experience it is for me to participate in services from synagogues all across the globe to countries that I've never seen, the names I know and now put faces to, and not just a face but a presence here, and to have learned from wonderful teachers who I never would have had the opportunity to learn from, scholars in other countries, and wonderful rabbis in other countries and cantors in other countries. It's been a whole global experience that clearly is different. Look, on one level, Daryl, every person on the call can answer this question, I think, as well as most everyone else can. Here, something extraordinary happened. Rabbis across the world report that they're getting more people participating in their programs via Zoom than they often do when people have to come to the congregations. Here, now, in part, that's because we're at home. Here, it's not just, it's Zoom versus getting in your car and going to shul. It's we're home here. And, short of locking people in their homes forever, that probably won't last. But boy, what a wonderful feeling it is to see faces that normally you see only on the high holidays, or see faces from your community that aren't involved in your shul, but clearly have an interest in things, and now there's a connection made that hopefully will carry over afterwards. I think this kind of technology will continue to be used far more robustly than ever before, than we've ever seen before. And what you described with the URJ, I think, is just a vivid picture of how that happens. I think the ability to check in with people, to people who are otherwise isolated, to reach out to them. We take for granted that that can be done, but not as many of our congregations are actually doing it as I would have hoped here, but some are doing it very conscientiously, really getting on Zoom with people who they've never met before, never seen before here. And for those people, some of the reports we get would break your heart. About it. Yes, I'm a member of the congregation. I haven't been going for years. I don't remember anyone anymore. Here, my generation has passed, and now they're reconnecting in a way that really is dramatic. Our ability to hold meetings across the globe. Here, to have teachers. I've gone to England many times to speak at the original Limud. But now, this morning, I spoke for Limud, and they had people from all over the world participating in it. Here, we need the ability to bring the best teachers in the world to our entire communities. That's something really exciting that we are part of now. So I think this will always be a part of what we have going forward. But is there a single person who can honestly tell me that the human contact of what it means to be in shul, to hug a friend, to be with somebody in mourning, to visit somebody who is ill, here, the true meaning of what a minyan is all about, a community at worship together, and how inspiring it is to be, is not sorely missed. Here, that's the other truth. At the same time, there'll be a new synthesis of these two things. I don't know exactly what it will look like, but it will be a new synthesis. And obviously, on just one more second on this.
Yeah. I got to follow on to this as well. Go ahead.
The most frightening part of it, though, isn't so much what I've talked about. It's the economic part of it and the economic life of the nation and the world. We don't know what that's going to be like, and how we're going to forge things in which people being close together are essential to the economy. We know what it means to go about it separately, what Amazon means, each, dealing with their own thing, but we don't know what it will be like. And I mean economy in its broadest sense here. We don't know what it'll be like and what community will feel like in terms of the economic life of this nation and the world. And I think that for many, many people is one of the most unsettling parts as they look at their own future, their own jobs, what it'll be like, what it's going to be like when, everyone in the shul comes back to work and begins working together, or in the factory that somebody works at, on the assembly line they work at. We have no idea. In a restaurant, to be full enough that it can break even, here, not 25% of the space. These new modalities, I think, is scary to people, and rightfully so.
it's a great segue to a couple of questions that folks had as you were talking, David. The first is an easy one. This is but I wanted to make sure that I asked the question Michaela had so that Michaela Hellman-Tincher is asking, can we visit World Union congregations around the world right now via Zoom? And how do we know what's available? And how do we invite their communities to ours?
Okay, so several things. If you are not on the World Union listservs, just go to the World Union website, here, www.WUPJ, World Union for Progressive Judaism, WUPJ.org, and sign up. Here, so you get the regular mailings, which report what's happening all across, including all of these services. Secondly, there's a wonderful app called Find My Community. Find My Community. Here, and you can pick any country that you're interested in going to or interested in being, connecting with. Chances are we have a congregation, a community there, and many of them, not all of them, because some of them are still very small and emerging, but many of them are broadcasting their services online to create a larger community so that relatives and friends of people can be part of the services, etc. And it's really wonderful to see it, even if you don't understand the language that the vernacular is in. There's really something extraordinary to see it. And they end up singing songs, sometimes to different melodies, blessings to different melodies, sometimes to the same. You feel connected either way, knowing that we all say the same blessings, the same prayers all around the world, in different forms, in different tones, in different melodies. It's an extraordinary experience, so I highly commend it to people. And clearly Beth is well connected in the World Union to let people know how welcome they would be, and I'm sure many actually do because they know many of you.
So David, a couple of questions about Israel and how our relationship with Israel is going to change. We have a new government sort of in Israel. Many of us have had to cancel our Israel travel. It broke my heart last week to have to cancel our Nifty in Israel program for this summer. We had one of the largest groups in the last 20 years going to Israel. Fundamentally, if international travel comes back slower than other travel, how do we continue to foster a relationship with Israel? So that's a set of questions. And then there's questions about Israel's willingness to recognize and fund the reform movement in Israel, especially with the new government, and how we can help encourage that.
Yeah, look, as we know, and can well imagine, this configuration of the Israeli government, both the outgoing and the incoming, are quite likely to be pouring millions of dollars, as they do every year to begin with, into the Orthodox institutions, communities, and structures of Israel. And they will put virtually nothing into the reform and conservative movements to support and sustain them. It means that we've got to do more than we would normally do. That's why this is such an important gathering. Can you imagine if several hundred of our congregations raise this kind of money for local social service providers and for the World Union? What a difference it would make. So that's one answer here. Secondly, and the connection that your support brings to Israel. When you invest, you care, you take pride in what happens, and it strengthens the connection. Secondly, travel. Travel will come back at some point. We have just like the biennial, I presume many of you have been to biennial conventions of the Union for Reform Judaism, one of the extraordinary Jewish experiences of this period of Jewish history. Nothing quite like it. Here it really is remarkable to pray with 5,000 people in the room together. As wonderful it is to have 5,000 people on your website praying, not the same as when you're in the same room. And we have a program called Connections set for the spring of 2021. And a lot of the regional biennial conventions in Europe, in Africa, and South America that have been canceled, we're encouraging, and those who have postponed synagogue trips, we're encouraging people to come around the Connections Conference to be part of it for a day or the whole thing, so that we can really have kind of an opportunity to be together as well. No one knows exactly when it'll open. I mean, is it possible even in the spring of 21, we won't be able to have it? I'm pretty confident we will, but I think we're looking at another 4 or 5 months until that kind of normal travel is going to be available. The real question is, I don't know if the rabbis of the congregation have thought it through. What are the high holidays going to be like if we can't come together for the high holidays? Here, I mean, you talk about daunting challenges to the sense of community and connection. Here, that clearly is an example. Here, and then again, what we always recommend, you know, people were involved because they voted for people in the World Zionist Congress that may or may not be held, and we think it may not, in October of 2020. That may be too early, may happen electronically, or it may be postponed. Here we have to see. But you know, that's another form of connection. Lobbying the Jewish consul in your community, here, sending letters, writing letters to the newspapers in Israel. All of these things create connections, and we need those connections more than ever before. I'm extraordinarily proud of what Gilad Kariv and the Israel Movement for Progressive Judaism, and Anat Hoffman and Noah Satah from the Iraq, the Israel Religious Action Center, that is before the Supreme Court all the time, fighting for your rights, fighting for the rights of our converts, of our couples to be married in consonance with their conscience. Here, all of this, they do extraordinary work. They're one of the leading forces in Israel against the growing trend of racism that seems to be percolating in segments of Israeli society. They're one of the most effective, both lobbying and legal aid to immigrants who come from Ethiopia, from Russia, from any place across the globe whose rights are not fully and adequately protected. That institution is just a jewel in the world Reform Jewish community. You make that possible, all of you. So go on the website there, follow. They're right in the middle of all the political battles. You get an insight that you would rarely have otherwise. So there are endless numbers of ways that people can connect and feel part of the upbuilding of that country into what we want it to be, a light to the nations, here, a model of what a modern democracy can be like. And we continue to fight for that dream every day.
David, 2 final questions. First, we know the needs are tremendous. And so it often is not a question of is there need, but how to prioritize need and how to assert with Congress, with the president, beyond just our communities, what our priorities should be. That's one question. And the final question is, you have a successor. The World Union named Rabbi Sergio Bergman as your successor. He will take office July 1. Maybe just tell this group more about him and what to look forward to.
Look, in terms of how to make decisions, as a donor, you can't do everything, but do something. Here, as I said, with the uncertainty in the markets, the uncertainty of job situations for people, it's often hard to take a risk of continuing at the high levels of some of the contributions that you make. but not doing part of it now and figuring out later to do the rest rather than waiting only until later to do it becomes vitally important for the causes that are most important to you. I think it's a very Jewish thing to do, to look for a mix of both the particular causes you care about, your synagogue here, and ensuring your synagogue remains strong, the URJ and ensuring that the URJ remains strong here, but also the universal issues. We Jews woven together the universal in the particular into a seamless whole here. That's why I was thrilled about the idea that you were going to be doing both the World Union and Sunnyvale together here. It's such a Jewish thing to do. Here, the universal, the particular, the local, and the global, all woven together into a cohesive whole here. So I was really excited about that and really pleased to be part of that here. But we as a movement are going to have to cut back. And it's going to happen in a lot of synagogues. It's going to happen with the Reform movement nationally. It's going to happen with almost every organization that you're part of. We're all going to be streamlining things to decide, what are we about? What are the core things we can't give up here? And how do we structure a limited resources and a more limited staff than we've had before in order to be effective in providing the services to the people who we represent and being an example to the world about us as to who we are and what we are about. Here, every organization is going through it. We're blessed that in Rick Jacobs, we have one of the truly great visionary leaders on the North American scene. And I couldn't think of anyone in whose hands I'd like to have this very tough road that we are traveling with the Reform movement than in the hands of Rick Jacobs. And we've had phenomenal leadership, Daryl, carried on by Jen Kaufman now. So that's extraordinary here. And so too, and we got a great new president of the Hebrew Union College here. This is the people in the institutions remain strong. It's challenged as they are at this time. And the same is true with the World Union. Here, it is a great organization. I cut my teeth on this organization. My father was the chair of the North American board when I was a kid. I was a young kid at went to the 1959 the World Union Biennial Convention, where I got to meet Lily Montague, the legendary suffragette Jewish philanthropist, leader of one of the founders of the World Union in 1926, who was still the president, had just succeeded Leo Beck, the legendary Leo Beck, as president of and my brother and I scored an interview for our school newspaper with Anne Frank's father, Otto Frank, at the time. My parents managed to get to 80 countries, mostly before jet airplanes, visiting Reform synagogues everywhere and communities everywhere that there was one. So this isn't often, even as young kids, dragged us along, sometimes happily, sometimes not so happily here. But boy, did we learn early about it. And one of the things that I learned is that one of the great figures of this past generation is Rabbi Sergio Bergman, who helped build the largest, most successful congregation in Argentina, one of the two most successful congregations in South America, a charismatic figure, bright, smart here. I used to think it was pretty cool that I was the first rabbi to hold the title United States Ambassador. He outdid me because he served as a minister in the government, the Macri government that preceded this government, where he distinguished himself as a minister of environmental affairs and became a world figure in that regard. So he has extraordinary international connections. He's a great Jewish leader. He built one of the great institutions there. He couldn't be a perfect person. The reason I stepped in was, and we couldn't say what the reason was, he was offered the job last May and accepted it, but he couldn't abandon it because they had an election, and he was so popular that the president said, you can't leave, and you can't tell anyone that you're going to leave until after the elections are over. That's why I was asked to step in for a year. Here, I have a great successor at the Religious Action Center of Jonah Pesner. I know that Sergio Bergman is going to be his match, taking it in new, visionary, exciting ways here. And as I've continued to work with Jonah, I'm going to continue to work with Sergio to do everything I can to make him and this enterprise a success. And with lay leaders like Charlie Rothschild on the management committee and other leaders here, I'm confident that they will rebound from the enormous challenges that we are facing to be stronger than ever.
David, thank you. Thank you always for your support, for your vision, for your leadership. I now would like to turn this Zoom over to Michaela Hellman-Tincher to introduce our other speaker this afternoon. Michaela.
Hi, well, it is my pleasure to help us weave together the local and the global by introducing Marie Bernard, who is going to talk to us a little bit about the extraordinary need we're seeing locally. Marie Bernard has been the executive director of Sunnyvale Community Services for the past 10 years. Sunnyvale Community Services is an essential nonprofit helping Sunnyvale residents meet their basic needs, food assistance, rental assistance, and help signing up for other services. And Marie has found a pathway to that role that I think many of us at Congregation Beth can relate to. She previously worked in high tech for HP. She worked for the Diocese of San Jose in the faith community, and now she is running this wonderful nonprofit. I've also been encouraged to mention that Marie has led Sunnyvale Community Services to join the Silicon Valley Sponsoring Committee, which is the local organizing effort that many Beth members, including some of the organizers of this call, have helped to lead. And that we will be joining with other faith and nonprofit groups on Tuesday evening to participate in a town hall to address the hole in our safety net. And that's particularly the hole leaving undocumented workers out of all the services that are being provided by our government, and encouraging the California leadership to provide services for that community specifically. And Charlie's put the link to RSVP online on the chat, and you could do so on the Beth website. And this is a scenario where more people is more power. So join in. Sunnyvale Community Services is partner agency with the Emergency Assistant Network. So we have a lot of those organizations that we support at Beth that support our very particular local communities. West Valley Community Services and Community Services Agency of Mountain View and Los Altos are two of those partner agencies working with Marie over time to serve everybody today. So I'm going to turn it over to Marie so we can learn more from her. Thank you, Marie, for sharing with us what you are seeing in our community today.
Okay, Michaela, thank you. And I've been really blessed to be able to work with Charlie. Thank you for inviting me. Following David is a tough act, but I am from Brooklyn, so I'm going to give it my all. Okay. And I also want to thank everybody for including the local and the global view. And I learned quite a lot already today. As Michaela said, we're a very local organization. And when I was at Hewlett-Packard, I was in charge of global programs, but I was living in Sunnyvale in the Bay Area. And when I joined Sunnyvale Community Services 10 years ago, it became really clear that I really needed to get to know my neighbors, to really understand what the needs were at a very personal level. And it's been a real joy and a challenge for the past decade to see how our valley has grown and how the need has really, really grown as well. You know, we're people of faith and the world is broken. There are a lot of cracks, and the COVID-19 crisis has cracked it wide open, especially for the most vulnerable. And as Michaela said, especially for people who have come here as immigrants, who may be not documented, but who are the workers that we're surrounded by, doing every kind of work in our community, who often don't have a safety net at all. The fact that many people who never thought they were going to lose their health insurance now don't have any because their job has gone away. The fact that people across the country are known to not have $400 in case of an emergency. The average rents in our Bay Area community are over $2,500 now. And so you've all heard the stories of people in our area who are renting rooms. There was one family that I got to know about where they were renting the kitchen because that was the only room that was not taken by other families. People who are living in their cars, people who don't have access to kitchens, and people who are working in kitchens, people who are CNAs, who are working in nursing homes and don't have a way of taking care of themselves or their children. And so there's been a lot of talk about, well, we're all in the same boat right now, and we're all suffering together. And someone pointed out to me that we're all in the same storm, but a lot of people don't have a boat. A lot of people don't have shelter. And it's a little hard for us right now, I think, some folks are saying, well, gee, I'm bored. I'm craving touch with people. And those are real human needs. There are other human needs that are also basic to survival: food and shelter. What is scary is that the mission of Sunnyvale Community Services, and again, we're one of 7 emergency assistance agencies across the county. And so Michaela knows us and my colleagues very well because we're always coming and saying, this is what's really going on. And by the way, we have to do something about it. So we are often the voice of people who don't have a voice, who don't have access to Michaela and her office, and the Board of Supervisors and our mayors and the people who are in power in our community. So we're trying to be of service, but at the same time, we're trying to be a voice and a convener of people who want to make a difference. And we all have a need to be of service. We all have a need to be connected. And right now, it's very, very hard, as David and everybody else have pointed out. It's hard to stay connected. There are some programs that require people to apply online or stand in line in order to apply for services. If you are extremely low income in Silicon Valley, you don't have access to Wi-Fi, you may share a not so smart phone across your family members, or you have a free phone or a low cost phone for 6 months, and then you get another number and another number because it is so hard to keep their heads above water. And what is truly scary is for people who are under the threat of not being here documented, or somebody in their family is. We estimate we helped over 9,000 of our neighbors last year with food or financial assistance, or both, and with connection to services and intensive case management. We're looking at well over 10,000. It might close into 12,000 people that we help this year. We forecasted that to be our 5-year goal, role in the community, and it's just leapfrogged. So that's going to be a huge, huge burden, as David mentioned, on the people who are the boots on the ground. How can we sustain ourselves while we're trying to help others? How can we be the place where folks who do have means can feel like their money is going to be well stewarded, and their efforts are going to be well-intentioned and carried out the way that they're hoping? At this point, we're trying to be advocates because the folks who don't have a boat, may not have a home or a phone, need our help to challenge as much as possible the things that are not fair or not even in our community, and also use legislation as much as possible to protect the most vulnerable. An example are the very quick action that was taken locally at the state, at the county, and also at our city level, moratoriums on evictions. Now our challenge is to inform everybody, both the tenants and the landlords, that that is the law. Now, what did that give us? Because people are still going to owe their rent. It means that at least we have time. It's not, so some people, it feels like you've got all the time in the world, and other people, it's a race. And so we are trying to do our best to tell landlords, yes, you need your income as well. Give us the time, and you have to not evict people. But for people who are potentially not feeling threatened or not feeling powerful, a landlord can still threaten them and say, well, I'm going to kick you out. I'm going to call the police, or I know you're here illegally, and so I'm going to report you. We are doing our best to make it so that the landlords know that they will get paid. We're right now paying double April and May rent for people coming to our door, and to also let people who are feeling very, very threatened that the rent will be paid. Unfortunately, 1 out of 9 or 1 out of 10 people that we help is already homeless. Now, our job is prevention of homelessness, but it is has been already growing, especially in the Bay Area, for years. We have a lot of programs to solve homelessness, and we feel like we're bailing out a boat that's got a lot of leaks in it. So I know that we have a video if you want to see what it's been like. I'm talking through a mask in the video, so hopefully you can still hear me. But we decided that we were inventing our programs as we went in light of COVID-19. No one had a rule book about how to use social distance when, as I say in the video, food is virtual. And how do you talk to somebody about rental assistance if you cannot talk to them? If you have to do it through a glass, through a door, through a phone. And so those challenges that a lot of the nonprofits are facing right now, we are inventing new ways of being together, of being in solidarity with people and doing some basic assistance. So I'll let Charlie start that video.
For 50 years, we've been an emergency assistance agency here in Santa Clara County, serving Sunnyvale. We're many weeks into the shutdown and shelter in place and social distancing, and we've never seen anything like this. Families are coming to us who have lost their jobs, their income, their sources of employment, health insurance, food, and being able to pay their rent. And what we've been able to do is pivot so that our volunteers, our staff, and our community are coming together. We've revamped all of our programs and services. One of the realities is that food is not virtual. And so you see us here today, we've reinvented our Produce Monday program, where we expect 1,100 families today to be coming for boxes of fresh fruits and vegetables here, supplied by Second Harvest Food Bank. We've got a slimmed down crew of volunteers and our staff wearing masks and gloves. They are putting themselves at risk, and we are doing everything we can to keep them safe, to keep our volunteers safe, to keep our clients safe. At the same time, they know how important it is to be here for our most at-risk community members. And so I'm so grateful to them for the innovation they brought to this, the energy they brought to this, and the amazing dedication they have to our work. We've never needed the support of the community more than right now. We so appreciate the financial assistance that we're receiving. So many people have donated to our cause, but also told us they're with us together. So this is really showing how Sunnyvale truly is the heart of Silicon Valley. It's never been put to the test more than right now, and I'm so, so grateful.
And I'm wearing the same scarf. Who knew? I just realized that. Anyway, I get emotional. I get very verklempt when this is all happening here. We have another video that we also showed of what it's like to do financial assistance through, we call it the bat phones. We have phone outside and inside so that people can talk to us, show us their ID, talk to a real person, because when you have to fill out forms to get any kind of assistance, any of you who have ever tried to navigate anything online with the government, with anybody else, you don't know how to fill half the stuff out. And so we have real people who can guide people with that, say, you know, this is the information we further need. When we're giving out financial assistance, and we're now doing it at the clip of $5,000 to $6,000 per family to pay for the April past month rent and the May month coming forward, we have to be stewards of other people's money. donations from foundations, the city of Sunnyvale, the county funds. And so we have to do that due diligence, but we have to do it in a way that is expeditious, that's efficient, and that is compassionate amongst, above all things. And that compassion has to be twinned with that responsibility that all nonprofits need to do. As we said, we've been around for 50 years. And we were already facing a lot of challenges. And I'll end with one thing. These cracks that have been exposed, it has exposed some myths that maybe some of us have been telling ourselves of, well, it's not that bad, or that connecting people to the patchwork of safety net services is what we do. There's no more patchwork. Just the fact that people don't have health insurance and access to health in our community is now rampant, and people are experiencing it for the first time. People who never thought that they were going to have the bottom fall out. That gives us the opportunity for solidarity and for very dramatic change. We've been talking about, is this going to be the new deal? Imagine trying to get Medicare passed in the environment 2 months ago. Wouldn't have happened. Social Security. No one wants the Social Security to be taken away from them, but then you say, what about other people who also need that? This, I hope, is an opening for us to rise, to really, really speak the truth to power, and to also recognize that I am part of that power structure. And in all humility, I'll get emotional again, but to really shed some of the things that I've been carrying around, others have been carrying around, the myths even in my own head, and to say, this is about sharing and about compassion and about truly being people of faith. It's going to be a lot of challenges. The faith communities have been incredible. And I see people every day who are volunteering with us, who are giving, I get a stat, we've been getting checks and of all sizes in the mail. And for the first time, people are writing notes, we're here with you, or I can't do this, please do it, because I don't have the way to help. And we trust you to do that. So this network that is across this wonderful Silicon Valley, used to be called the Valley of Heart's Delight. This is our work. We're the people who have to do this. We have to be the hands and the hearts of God in our community. And I'm thrilled to be here. I'm going to get, all right, I better stop because I'm getting quite overwhelmed here. I'm feeling the faith just flooding at me here, and it's quite overwhelming. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie, and thank you both for what you're doing every day and also for teaching us and letting us to be part of that. We are very moved. And now I get to turn it over to Sherry, one of the fearless organizers of this amazing event.
Hi, everyone. Our world is hungry right now. Hungry for food, hungry for a spiritual place to rest their souls. By supporting this World Union virtual fundraiser, you are feeding that hunger. For the past 20 years, Beth has supported our extended family in Poltava, Ukraine, and nourished their hunger for a spiritual place that restored a Judaism that communism took away. Today, Beth is responding to the empty stomachs that our neighbors have during this pandemic by partnering with Sunnyvale Community Services. They do more than just feed the needy, as you've seen. They help to restore their self-respect and dignity with the services they provide. Thank you for helping us raise over $7,000. Our goal is $10,000, but we could even reach even higher because anything over $10,000 goes directly to Sunnyvale services. Please reach into your heart, give a little extra to feed the hungry souls of our world. And we know with your help, we can do this. We can spread the word. Ask your friends. And speaking of friends, an incredible thank you to the incredible Rabbi David Saperstein, who brought us all together to fight this pandemic in real terms. And to Charlie Rothschild, who knows all the right connections to make special things happen. And to Marie Bernard, whose agency practices Tikkun Olam each day as it tries to repair the world for those people who are at risk in our community. Daryl Messenger, thank you for moderating this event so skillfully. Michaela, your support is meaningful to all of us, and a special thank you to Rabbi Janet Martyr, Rachel Tash, and Liz Vaisman, and the Poltava Committee, who connected the dots at Beth to help create this virtual event and program. As we close, I want to thank you again for being there. Hineni, you are all there. You all have to be there to help us do what is right and continue the mitzvah of helping our neighbors. And I will let Rabbi Janet end this program with her special words. Thank you all.
Rabbi Martyr, may I just intrude just for 20 seconds? I noticed late Steve Bauman on the call, who has been such a wonderful leader of the World Union for Progressive Judaism. I just wanted to acknowledge him here and thank him for everything he's done for the organization.
Well, this is a prayer of gratitude for Marie Bernard for her presentation today, and for Rabbi David Saperstein, not just for his presentation today, but for all that he's done throughout his long and brilliant career. These words are written by the poet Gwendolyn Brooks, who was the first African-American to win a Pulitzer Prize. That time, we all heard it, cool and clear, cutting across the hot grit of the day. The major voice, the adult voice, foregoing rolling river, foregoing tearful tale of bale and barge and other symptoms of an old despond. Warning in music words, devout and large, that we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. Gwendolyn Brooks wrote that, a poem, to describe how it felt to listen to the voice of the great Paul Robeson, the singer and actor and activist for social justice. There are voices, we know, that lift you out of your private concern, that lift you up from despondency to hope, that remind you of your kinship with all humanity. We offer thanks today for courageous voices that call us to conscience and call us to action. May we heed their call and remember that we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. Thank you to all of you for participating in our special program today. Shavua Tov. May it be a good week.
Thank you.